So the next panel that we'd like to bring up is to talk about accountability and oversight. So if we can have Jason Shadowall, Sam Foreman, Valeria Espinosa, Cece Carroll, Angel Ariana, and Ernesto Ayala. And if you want to get up and stretch, get up and stretch. I think we've got everybody up here. So just same thing, if we could just go down the line and you could introduce yourself, tell us what organization you're with, and why you're here real quickly.
Hi everyone, my name is Valeria Espinosa. I'm with the Affirm LA chapter. We're a transnational feminist anti-imperialist organization. We have 10 chapters across the US for over 28 years.
Hello everyone, my name is Chris Carroll. I'm with Socialist Alternative. I am originally from that corrupt city of Chicago, so it was no wonder when I relocated to LA that I felt so familiar.
My name is Jason Shadwell. I'm here with March and Rally Los Angeles. I'm also a delegate to the Democratic State Party, though I do not represent them. Let me make that very clear.
Hi, I'm Sam Foreman. I'm here on behalf of Democratic Socialists of America at Los Angeles. I am the co-chair of the Healthcare Committee, and I'm up here to talk about our awful legislature.
So the first thing that we wanted to get into with this panel is to talk a little bit about who has the power right now to make decisions about the Olympics. Who has the power, who should have the power. So who has the power, who should have the power? Whoever wants to kick that off. Anybody?
So I think that when we talk about accountability, I think we have to see that historically, the only thing that has held the capitalist class accountable, and when we're talking about the Olympics, we're talking about the capitalist class, the IOC, the bid committee, their political servants, Eric Garcetti and the city council. They represent the capitalist class. The only thing historically that has held the capitalist class accountable is a united, organized, fighting working class. And so it begs the question, what will unite the working class, all the layers of the working class? The answer, in short, is a set of demands. When we imagine a Los Angeles that we want to live in, we imagine a Los Angeles that demands a rent freeze and an elected citizens oversight committee that controls the rent control mechanism, because the one we have is broken. It's a Los Angeles that demands an elected citizens oversight committee that has direct accountability over the LAPD and LA County Sheriffs. It's long, long overdue. We think of a Los Angeles that demands a moratorium on ICE raids. This is the LA that we imagine, but it's the LA that we're going to have to fight for. We're going to have to press these demands. We're going to have to build this coalition much larger than it is. These organizations, we're going to have to learn how to have political debates. We're not always going to see eye to eye, but we do see our common interests. We have to learn how to do the hard work of these political debates, because that's only going to make our consensus that much stronger and get us moving in a direction. They talked about alleviating the pressure that led to 92. We do not want to alleviate the pressure. We want to build pressure, give it shape, and then aim it directly at City Hall.
Right, so who has the power right now is a great question, because we all think that the legislators have the power, the City Hall has the power, the police have the power. That's a common misconception, and it's one of those things where power exists where you believe it exists. And until we start taking power for ourselves, we're not going to have it. Until we start believing that we actually do have the power to go out there and change things, to pressure those elected officials who are supposed to be public servants to us. Until we get out there and we convince other people that, no, politics is not this thing that you don't talk about at work. It's this thing that you don't talk about in polite settings. No, politics is something you talk about always, because it affects all of us. So, yeah, we have the power. We need to believe it, and we need to convince others of it.
Cool. And then I just kind of want to field, just some kind of, quick and dirty, real procedural things in terms of who has the power on this. For those who aren't aware, on Friday, City Council voted to give the mayor the authority to sign the host city contract, and they voted to approve the memorandum of understanding with our government and the bid committee. But this process is not over yet. The city will continue to have hearings and meetings on this, and the state legislature still has to act. They have to provide a financial backstop of $250 million in cost overruns. So I want to let Sam talk about that a little bit.
Thank you. I guess I wanted to get into a couple of experiences I've had with this legislature, and also I'm originally from New York, so speak a little bit about their legislature, but just a little bit. I believe it was 2011, there was an independent caucus formed called the IDC, which stands for the Independent Democratic Caucus, within the state legislature of New York. And the goal of that caucus was to split the divide between the gridlock that was not getting bills or any legislation passed in New York between Democrats and Republicans. So they called themselves Democratic, but they were independent. Within 2 years, they formed a coalition with the Republicans. Now every bill gets blocked again, and it's business as usual. Their caucus has caused more of a disruption than they have to help. When I think about that, and I put it in the context of our legislature in Los Angeles and California, it's kind of the same thing without a name. We have people who are elected in what we call a Democratic supermajority, where we have 2/3 of the legislature, and the expectation is progressive Democratic legislation will get through. However, we just saw a single-payer bill that was studied, appropriated in some circumstances, and then shelved before it could be voted on. That is with a Democratic supermajority and a majority of Democratic voters wanting this. So the anecdote that I have is I met somebody from Southern Virginia, which is now suddenly even more relevant than it was when I met him. I met him at a convention in Chicago about a week ago, and he was telling me about his legislature and how they bust unions and make it impossible for people to vote, and essentially are very unmasked as far as how racist they are. And it was devastating to hear it. It was very emotionally impactful to me. And then I just thought, and I asked him a question. I said, what if they didn't tell you to your face that they were going to do these things? What if they told you what you wanted to hear and then they didn't do that? What if they promised certain things, they ran on those promises, were elected, and then put those bills forward with no intention of passing them, much like this single-payer bill? What's worse? Is it worse when they tell you to your face that they're going to ruin your life, or when they lie to you and tell you that they're going to help your life and then ruin it? So I think that's something to consider about our legislature and the idea of a Democratic supermajority, when it just seems like no matter what party you're affiliated with, you're looking out for yourself and how you can make money, and not really helping anybody who elected you or who you're elected to represent.
Just to put a little button on that, our faithful friend Anthony Rendon, who decided to park the healthcare bill in the Rules Committee, has, as part of the agreement with the city, issued a letter of support for this Olympic bid, saying that the state legislature is going to act and they are going to provide funding. They have yet to pass that legislation because they're not in session, but they are behind this idea. And for all of his bluster, Anthony Rendon said that the single-payer bill was woefully incomplete, and yet he is racing to offer money for an Olympic Games that has no budget. So, I wanted to ask our panel, what would it look like if the residents of Los Angeles had a real say and voice in hosting the Olympics? Valerie, maybe you want to take this question. So, or talk about whatever you want. I don't know.
Well, throughout the course of this panel, we've discussed the existing marginalization and effects the Olympics had on communities of color. My comrades have demonstrated how the Olympics will disproportionately affect people of color when it comes to the displacement and increased militarization. Affirm is here today to discuss how transnational immigrant migrant women of color will be disproportionately impacted by the Olympics and further oppressed. Rather than spending an inordinate amount of money on this event, why don't we use this money to provide services and resources to marginalized people in LA? So in Los Angeles, we here continue to be an increasingly diverse county. Women of color, we represent almost 70% of women in the county. In Los Angeles, we are a top point of entry for victims of human and sex trafficking. We are one of FBI's top 13 areas for human trafficking. This is due to the close proximity to the border, and as a diverse, sprawling city, it makes it easy for traffickers to transport their victims from community to community. As of this year, there have been over 4,000 trafficking cases reported. And out of those 4,000 cases reported, guess which state has the highest cases reported? Anyone want to take a guess? California. As of June this year, we have 705 cases reported, a majority of which are sex trafficking cases. Women of color are overrepresented in the sex trafficking and prostitution. The largest group trafficked in the U.S. now is Asian Pacific Islander. According to the most recent FBI report, 40% of victims and survivors reported in cases were Black. Undocumented immigrant migrant women struggle to find job opportunities and are pushed into prostitution with deportation as a looming threat. So the question comes, the bid committee and Casey Wasserman, they said they raised $50 million, right? $60 million, right, to, for the games and whatnot. So why are we not using that money, again, to provide services and resources to these marginalized people? Sheriff McDonald, he opposed SB 54, and one of the reasons he said was because it would get in the way of combating trafficking. What's being done? Who's being held accountable for this? Nothing's being done. So I just want to say that women's lives are not a game to be played with. Thank you.
Okay, so the question was, what does it look like if we were actually represented, right? That's a great question. It's something that we should be talking about much more often in many more venues. Because the way that we do things, people already believe. There are people out there, you know them, who believe that, well, what do you mean? There's already accountability, right? We have elections. If the politicians don't do what we want, then we just vote them out, right? Well, then why is it that incumbents get reelected over and over despite the fact that everybody hates them? I can tell you one. I learned this as a delegate, and it was a shocker. So these incumbents, they get their endorsements and they get their sums of money from the Democratic Party through these internalized processes where these delegates vote, right? So how are these delegates chosen? There are 3,300 of them in the state of California. And a third of those are elected locally in their assembly districts. Another third are elected during primary elections, and they're called county committee, or county central committee members. You may have seen them on the ballot if you're a registered Democrat, and you probably thought, I don't know who these are, but I have to vote for somebody. Okay? That's who they are. That last third, and this is the kicker, that last third are appointed by existing party leaders and elected officials. They literally appoint 1/3 of the body that endorses them and funds them. Who here is shocked by this? Yeah, you should be. You should be angry. You should call up your elected officials. You should find out who these people are, other than me, hi. Find out who they are and hold them accountable as well. Because they supposedly represent you. Even if you're not a Democrat, they're out there making decisions that affect your life, and they deserve to be held accountable. They deserve to hear your opinion, and you deserve to have your opinions heard. And we have to think beyond party boundaries. We have to think beyond physical, geographical boundaries. We really have to get more into a mindset where we're joining lots of these other groups, we're engaging as many people as possible, and we are routinely talking about how do we govern ourselves. Did you know that there are alternative voting systems? Right, we have what's called first past the post, where everyone votes for the candidates that other people pre-select for us, and whoever gets the most votes is the winner, right? Well, there are other systems like ranked choice, popularized by the Green Party. There's a system that I personally like called score voting. Essentially, it works like Netflix rating. You rate all the candidates 1 to 5, whoever has the highest average wins. It's pretty cool. There are so many different ways that we can be organizing ourselves, that we can be making decisions in our local organizations, at work, I don't know, in your garden club. And look it up, just try it out. I mean, try it somewhere where it doesn't matter that much first. Get a feel for it. And then we can grow from there. We can have that proof of concept that can grow. I think that's what it looks like to genuinely be represented.
I think to go back to what Steve said about Anthony Rendon calling the single-payer bill woefully incomplete, something worth keeping in mind is back when Arnold Schwarzenegger was our governor, we passed a cap-and-trade bill, which is still in place, that was the same length as the single-payer bill. Rendon's issue with the single-payer bill was that it was very thin, it was only 12 pages, same number of pages as our current environmental protections. So that's something that I think is worth considering. On top of that, the job of the Assembly is to complete the bill. So if it's woefully incomplete, why are you here? What did we bring you here for? Why are you in office? To dial that back a little bit further to before the Assembly, when it was in the State Senate, the two authors of the bill, Ricardo Lara and Tony Atkins, who are both state senators, I went to a private party for Labor United where Ricardo Lara was a speaker. He was actually honored there for his work on healthcare. And he spoke about his bill and immediately started dialing it back from a single-payer bill to maybe a hybrid type of bill, maybe something with a public option. Maybe we'll have to wait until the next president gets into office. I don't know. He wrote the bill. This is his bill. Suddenly it's not feasible to him. So what I think about when I hear that is he had no intention from the beginning of making this bill happen. He was elected, he was put in office, he came up with progressive legislation that the the California Nurses Association provided a study to fund, to explain how we could afford that, and showed that we could save $39 to $40 billion if we moved to that type of system. And at the same time, he had no intention of passing it. He got it through the Senate with the help of Kevin De Leon, who is the president pro tempore. I hope I pronounced that. It sounds like a Japanese fried dish. And it passed through the state Senate to the Assembly incomplete, even though the study was provided to the Assembly, and then immediately shelved. So I don't think there was ever an intent to pass this. I have a very good reason to believe that there was never any intent to pass that. And as a result, every day, 5 people die. We have 3 million people who are uninsured completely. We have millions other who have no coverage that they can use because it's so prohibitively expensive to pay certain co-pays, deductibles, that they can't even consider doing this. And our state legislature is playing games with them and playing games with people's lives. And every day, 5 people are dying as a result of this, and it's going to keep happening until something changes. And to go back to what a lot of these people are saying, and people on the panels before this, the way that we change this is to speak to people, to ignore the legislature and stop relying on them, because they've already proven they're not going to help us. And just kind of understand what speaks to people's self-interest as it pertains to healthcare and our communities, and address those directly, so that when something like this comes up again, they don't feel like they have the political cover to just shelve that their jobs are actually on the line, and the lives of millions of people are on the line, and they can take that seriously instead of just playing games with everybody and making us think that something that is very plausible is completely unrealistic.
If only they had called it the Olympics and they would just be like, oh, we'll pass this. This is totally legit.
So it's clear that the electoral path is blocked. It doesn't have to be. I think the left really needs to begin serious discussions, in earnest, about an independent workers' party on the left. Such a party would act in a symbiotic relationship with the social movements, all the issues that we care about, all the hard work that we pour into the organizations we work for and the coalitions we work within. One example of this is in Seattle. Socialist Alternative, in coordination with a social movement building for a $15 minimum wage, got one of our comrades elected, Shama Sawan. Thank you. It's a huge deal. It's the first socialist elected in Seattle in 70 years. And it's incredible what one elected official accountable to the working class can get achieved on a very hostile, democratic city council. Again, Seattle is much like LA. It's lifted up as this gleaming, progressive city, right? It's nothing but a facade. What we were able to achieve in Seattle was passing that $15 legislation. After that, the next thing on the platform was to tax the rich. Seems like a completely radical idea, right? Something that's not going to resonate with communities. Absolutely it resonates with working class communities. That legislation was passed in Seattle. The ultra-rich in Seattle are being levied a tax, and that money is going to go towards solving the social problems in Seattle. So this can be done, and we have to start talking about how we can build this party nationally. And we can start it in LA as well and talk about becoming a model for the rest of the nation and creating this party, an independent workers' party on the left, and start focusing our energies there. Cheers.
That dovetails really nicely with something that came from the audience. It's not a question, it's just kind of a really awesome call to action. If we, the people, really have the power, we must do a referendum to stop this BS and demand education and bringing this to registered voters so we can win. We are more renters, and when our housing is on the line to displacement, people can be united. So, yeah. And then this is a pretty good question that kind of ties into that. What are some concrete demands that we can make to protect this city from the negative impacts of the Olympic Games? What are some demands that we can be making of our city officials or for ourselves in building power? We want to field that.
First thing that comes to mind is, how about making LA an actual sanctuary city?
I mentioned just a few of my initial remarks. One would be a moratorium on ICE raids. End them now. Go along with my comrade's comments about a sanctuary city. Make it a binding resolution with real teeth. It should be written by an elected citizens council. I think we also mentioned the idea of a rent freeze, an elected citizens council that controls the rent control mechanism. There's all kinds of things we can do. But once we come up with these demands, we have to decide which ones we're going to prioritize and which ones we're going to press forward and get behind and build power behind it and test it and see what works and what strategy is going to work around it.
We can begin to divest in big corporations, take their money out of Wells Fargo. We can focus more on the increase in health inequities, especially for women of color. You know, poverty has a face, and it's that of women. So.
I think those were all better ideas than I am going to add to this, but I think what we can do to achieve all of the goals that were mentioned, in addition to demanding rights surrounding the Olympics, goes back to what I was saying about speaking to people and speaking to our communities. There's a lot that people are not aware of. There are a lot of people who think the Olympics are a very good thing for the city, who think that it will make the city better, it will make us money, it will help people who are in trouble right now. And we need to engage these folks and talk to them and go around our communities and have these difficult conversations and try to all get on the same page, because if we're not going to make these changes.
And to that end, you know, I think it's easy for us to look at the situation as it stands now and what happened last week at City Council and think that this is a done deal and that this is over. But I think the breadth and the depth of the issues that have been talked about tonight by our panelists speaks to how there are all these problems that we are all acutely aware of, that, you know, even if the Olympics disappeared tomorrow, we would still have to face these things. And we're ready to face these things. We're ready to face these things through the lens of this Olympic Games coming to the city and what it represents as an obstacle to this work. But I think that we've got a room full of people here who are ready to do that work and who are ready to have these conversations and build this power and make these demands. You know, something that struck me that one of the audience members put forward as a question, and this is something that, you know, we've thought about as a coalition and that we're working on, is somebody wanted to ask, why are there hardly any people of color from the community here at this meeting? And while that is a valid criticism, and I totally hear it, we are working to make these conversations and take these conversations to the neighborhood. As part of that effort, this past weekend, members of our coalition were knocking on doors in this neighborhood here in South LA and having these conversations with the people who are going to be affected most by these games. And that is something that we want to continue to do. And all of you here tonight are armed with more information than you came here with, and can have these conversations with your friends, with your neighbors, with your family, with your coworkers, and, you know, join us out on the streets having these conversations in the areas that are going to be most affected. I think that's what's going to help build the movement that we need to bring these issues to the forefront and show how these Olympic Games represent a vision of the city that runs counter to the vision that we're trying to provide. So. Does anybody else in this particular panel have anything else they want to add to the discussion at this moment?
Yeah, as long as we're sharing radical, crazy ideas. I come from the software industry, right? And so when I view the way that laws are made and the way people discuss laws, I see it through the software lens. And how many people here have heard of open source software? Oh wow, a lot more hands than I expected. Why don't we have open source laws? Why do we even need politicians to write them and pass them in the first place? Why don't we just put it out there where everyone can see them, anyone can offer their edits? We have a completely different system. And if we want to implement something like that, again, we could start at the very local level. Create your own little government, like neighborhood level. It doesn't matter. The city's not going to pay you any mind. You're this tiny little neighborhood. Please show up, everyone Heights. I don't know. sorry, bad advice. But do something local, right? Try that level of governance and see how far you can get. And if we have enough people experimenting like that at that level, we're going to get some good ideas, because that's really decentralized.
Thank you so much. I want to give a big round of applause to our panel panel.